Hey everyone, it's American Patriot. I'm going to be doing another review on this first-person shooter called Homefront, which I picked up about a few weeks back. In the game, you've got the single-player campaign and the multiplayer, and I'll go over the single-player campaign right now. The game opens up with like a montage of stuff that happens over the course of like 10 years when Korea unifies itself and they gain all this fucking military power out of nowhere, and then they're like, oh, why don't we just fucking take over the whole world, or at least the United States. And so basically there's all this shit like some bird flu and like some oil prices going up or something that prevents the United States military from growing, so we're all scattered and shit. And basically it's convoluted a little bit and not very believable in my opinion at all. The game doesn't really do a great job of explaining how Korea establishes a huge army, and it expects you to forget that since the US bailed out both France and other European countries in 2 world wars, those countries would realistically attempt to aid us. Bottom line is that this is America, and I'm not buying into any of this bullshit. With that being said, the story in this game is actually quite good. You play as an American pilot named Jacobs, and some Koreans burst into your house while you're trying to catch some shut-eye, throw you down some stairs, and roughly escort you onto a bus. While you're on the bus, you get to witness some horrific and ultimately pretty sad moments.
Think about it, just
wait!
Soon after, you're bailed out by Connor and Rihanna, who basically act as your teammates throughout the whole game, and then you're sent to kick some Korean ass. During my playthrough of the game, I definitely felt attached to a lot of these characters. The only real bad thing about the story is that the ending is very abrupt, and most of the battles just don't feel very large scale compared to games like Call of Duty, except for the final mission of the game. But there is some solid voice acting here, and you do care about the characters, in my opinion. The game plays pretty similarly to Call of Duty. You have different sections of the game. Sometimes it's like an all-out firefight. Other times you have to sneak past a bunch of people and snipe them all. And the mission structure is generally pretty similar to Call of Duty. The one complaint I have is that most of the guns just don't feel all that accurate sometimes, and the handling just isn't as well as it could have been. Also, most of your guns just don't have a very high ammo capacity. So you're going to be having to switch out your guns after you kill like 5 to 10 enemies. So I think this is a pretty cheap way that the game forces you to switch guns every 5 to 10 enemies. It feels like a cheap way to try and add variety to the guns you use. But there's definitely some guns just that aren't that effective against your enemies. There's actually some cool parts in the game where you actually control Goliath, which is basically like an APC and has rockets attached to it, so you just aim the Goliath in the direction that you want and it blows up a lot of your enemies, so that's definitely a cool way to add variety to the combat. But besides that, there's not really a whole lot to really talk about with this game. I mean, if you played Call of Duty, then you'll probably recognize this game's mechanics right off the bat. You kind of already expect the way this game's going to play out. I thought the campaign was generally pretty fun to play through, but unfortunately it just doesn't have that epic feel that the modern Warfare games have, and that I'm assuming most huge first-person shooter fans would likely expect out of this kind of a game. The last 2 levels were probably my favorite. One of them you get to pilot a helicopter and blow a lot of shit up, and the final mission is where you're on the Golden Gate Bridge. You have to fend off a lot of Koreans. That's definitely a very epic mission, but that's pretty much the only real memorable firefight in the whole game. Everything else is just pretty generic. The campaign takes around 5 hours to complete, and I don't see a whole lot of replay value here besides collecting these like 49 collectibles or something like that scattered throughout the levels. And it is fun, but with the disappointing story ending, it just feels a bit disappointing even though it is fun. The game certainly isn't spectacular in terms of the audio-visual department. The graphics in the game are solid, but a lot of the textures appear a bit blurry. There's a lot of clipping, and some of the character models could definitely have used a bit more work. But there's some cool set pieces throughout the campaign, and the audio is pretty good. There's some good dialogue here, solid voice acting, and all the sound effects are pretty good in the game. The multiplayer is basically like Call of Duty. You have your like 5 custom slots, and you can upgrade your weapons and like buy new weapons as you progressively rank up in the multiplayer. But the actual gameplay isn't that great. I mean, there's some shitty hit detection systems, and I think most of the weapons are pretty shitty to handle, and the aiming's pretty poor on them. You can have vehicles in the multiplayer, which I just think suck. I don't like vehicles in multiplayer very much, aside from Halo. and most of the multiplayer maps just aren't very good. So overall, yes, I did enjoy Homefront. I think it is a solid game, but it isn't quite as epic or engaging as I thought it would be. The story is definitely one of the strongest parts of the game. It is very compelling, and you care about a lot of the characters, but the gameplay just isn't as epic. The levels are kind of generic, and the multiplayer, while it adds a bit of longevity to the game, it feels too much like Call of Duty, except without all the stuff that makes it Call of Duty, that makes it more fun to play. Add this in with a very abrupt and disappointing ending, and I would say that this would definitely be a very strong rent, but I wouldn't recommend paying $60 for it. I think it's more in the $30 to $40 price range. But yeah, any fan of first-person shooters should definitely check this game out.
Oh, I'll tell you what. I'll take the bitch, Scarface hiding over there, and you can walk away without a bullet in you.
I think you're getting a bad end of that deal.